Hey there, my name is Megan and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my September wrap-up. In the month of September, I read 5 books, which is pretty much my goal, and I had a really good reading month. But before we go ahead and get on into the books, if you are not already subscribed to my channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button, as well as the little bell icon so you can be notified every time I post new content. I post new videos every Sunday and every Wednesday, and sometimes I post bonus videos on Fridays. So, as with all of my wrap-ups, I'm going to start with my lowest rated books and go on up to my highest rated books. The first book I'm going to be talking about is my 3-star book of the month, and that is A Reaper at the Gates by Sabaa Tahir. This is a YA fantasy, and it is the 3rd book in the An Ember in the Ashes quartet, with the 4th book coming out this December. This book follows a very Roman-inspired world. It's very brutal, and it follows an oppressed class known as scholars who are fighting against the Empire and these oppressive soldier-like regime known as marshals. We follow 2 characters. We follow a slave girl named Laya, and then we follow a deserter of the military marshals called Elias. I really enjoyed books 1 and 2. I didn't enjoy this one as much, only because I felt like a bunch of different conflicts were introduced into the story that didn't necessarily need to be in there. These conflicts had to do with outside invading forces, and there was these new, military kind of leaders introduced with this enemy, and I just felt like it was conflict that wasn't necessary to the story. And with books 1 and 2, we were introduced with enough conflict and enough of a story to drive the plot, and that this book was kind of just put in there to make this a quartet. So I didn't enjoy it as much. I didn't really see the necessity of this book. I will say that the one thing I really did like about the 3rd installment was that Helene, I felt like, got a lot of page time, and we're beginning to see her character develop a lot more. And there was a twist thrown into this book that I'm usually pretty decent with plot twists, but I just did not see that one coming. So either I was completely oblivious to all of the clues in the first 2 books, or Sabaa Tahir just decided to add in this plot twist. But it was a good plot twist. It was really well done. So that I really liked in this book. But all in all, I just felt like there wasn't enough in this part of the story to keep me that interested, and I kind of wish that this plot had been spread among 3 books rather than 4. So I didn't hate this book, it just wasn't my favorite out of the series I've read so far, but I am looking forward to reading book 4 when it comes out. The next book I read was a 4-star read, and that is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This is an adult sci-fi thriller, and I do have a full review of this book, so I'll put that up in the cards if you're interested in checking that out. But this book follows a man named Jason, and he is a physics professor, and at one time he was working on some really kind of innovative physics projects, but when his wife got pregnant, he decided to leave all of that behind to raise a family. And one night, he ends up getting kidnapped by a man who knows everything about him, and he injects him with a drug, and when Jason wakes up, he wakes up into a world that is not his own. So he spends the whole book trying to figure out what's going on, what happened to his life in his world, and trying to get back to his family. One thing I like about this book is that it is very fast-paced, and Blake Crouch's writing style kind of allows for that, because he writes very simplistic sentences and he doesn't provide a ton of detail. He just provides enough of detail about what's going on with the plot and the characters in order to keep the reader interested. So it's not like a scientific book that is completely bogged down in details. He just gives us enough in order to understand what's going on in the plot, which I really like in like a short sci-fi. And I did really like how the book ended. I really liked the last quarter of the book because there was kind of an element introduced into the plot that I really wasn't expecting and I found really interesting. But the basis of this, which is based on the theory of like multiverses and things like that, I do feel is something that has been written before in movies and TV shows and other books. So that concept wasn't necessarily new to me, which kind of took away a little bit of my enjoyment. But overall, if you like just fast-paced sci-fi that is based on like theoretical physics and is something that is easy to understand if you're just venturing into science fiction, then I would definitely recommend Dark Matter. My next 4-star book was Shorefall by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is the 2nd book in the Founders series, and I did read Foundryside last month, I believe, and really enjoyed it. So far, this series has some of the most unique magic that I have come across in adult fantasy. It reminds me a lot of like coding in our digital age, but it follows a magic system where scribers can write these sigils or kind of like codes on these bronze plates and implant them into things, and these physical things can go against their reality. And they have built these machines called lexicons where convincing inanimate objects to go against reality can be done at like a remote distance. So there's all of this cool kind of technological magic in this world that I really thought was super cool. But we follow a group of characters that are introduced in book 1, the main character being Sansia, who is a thief, and she can also hear the sigils that are written into physical things and actually conversate with them and convince them to reverse their reality, whereas she doesn't need like a lexicon or anything like that. And we actually learn a lot about Sansia's history and how she's able to do that, but then we also follow a whole bunch of different characters and kind of their involvement in this magic system. But I liked book 2 because it definitely expanded on the world. We are introduced to kind of like the main antagonist, whereas in book 1 it was just kind of alluded to, and all of the things that happened in book 1 kind of built up to the introduction of this antagonist. So I really thought that that was kind of cool. This series is super fast paced, and Robert Jackson Bennett like is constantly introducing new information to the reader with regards to the world, the lore, the magic system, and at some points it is a lot to keep up with. So that is probably the only thing I don't like about this series, is just it is very fast paced, and I feel like every other page he's explaining something to us, kind of like info dumping a little bit. But all in all, this is a really fun series, definitely a cool world and magic system, and I'm really excited to get to book 3 when it comes out, which I'm not sure when that is. The next book I read was Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This is an adult thriller, and I got this from my local library via ebook because that's the only format they had it in, which is kind of weird because this is his newest book. I was not planning on reading this in September, but I'm really glad I did because it is just the perfect spooky autumn season read. But it follows a girl named Maggie, and when Maggie was little, her parents bought this haunted house called Baneberry Hall. They didn't know it was haunted, but some gruesome murders had occurred there over time since its like origin. And Maggie was 5 when she moved in there, and after the family moved out, after only 2 weeks of living there, her father wrote this book about all of their paranormal experiences there and why they ended up leaving, and this book became a bestseller, and Maggie grew up kind of underneath the shadow of this book, and people are always like, well, did everything that happened in the book true? But Maggie is convinced that her father was lying and that there is no ghost in Baneberry Hall. Upon his deathbed, he ends up telling her that he still owns Baneberry Hall, despite the fact that they haven't lived there in 2-3 decades. And after his death, Maggie decides to move back and kind of research the events of the book to kind of determine if they're true or not. So this book is extremely atmospheric. You have an old creepy house, you have murder mysteries, you have descriptions of ghostly events and paranormal activities, and it's told in 2 different timelines, the current timeline from Maggie's perspective and then her father's perspective from like 2 decades prior, and you're kind of trying to read both timelines and see if you can determine the truth from the lies. So I thought that that was really, really interesting, and how the book ended, I personally was not expecting. And it was a really good book. I read it in just a couple days. It was a page turner, just like the other Riley Sager book that I read. I just wanted to know what happened. And Riley Sager definitely has a really, really accessible writing style. His writing is really easy to read and get through, and it's super, super easy to get yourself immersed in his world. So I definitely recommend Home Before Dark if you're looking for a spooky, spooky read this October, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And my 5-star book for the month is Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. This is book 2 in the Stormlight Archives, and oh, I am so glad that I finally finished this book. It took me a good month to finish, and wowzer. I gave Way of Kings 5 stars, and I didn't think that anything could trump it, but Words of Radiance definitely trumped it. There's really not a ton I can say about this book without giving away spoilers, but I just really loved reading from Shallan's perspective. She just develops so much as a character in this book, and we get the full scope of her backstory and where she came from and why she is the way that she is and what actually happened with her mother and father and what they knew about her. And we get a lot of manifestation of power from a lot of these characters that you wouldn't expect. We learn more about the Parshendi and the Voidbringers and the visions that Dalinar is seeing. So all of the things that are introduced in Way of Kings are further expanded and elaborated upon in Words of Radiance, and that ending, oh my gosh, I am just so excited for Oathbringer that I can't even stand it. So I definitely gave Way of Kings 5 out of 5 stars, and I do plan on doing like a spoilery chat video, so be on the lookout for that coming out to you soon. All right, you guys, so that is it for my September wrap up. Let me know in the comments what you read this September, and if you have read any good books, if you have any good recommendations. And as always, don't forget to check out my other wrap up videos by clicking the playlist below, and I will see you guys soon with another video. Goodbye. Thank you.